that October 25th?
It was October 18th.
Good evening. We'd like to open the Planning Board meeting of November 8th, 2017 at about 7:11. Had some technical difficulties here. Apologize for getting started late. Tonight we have present Guy Horn, Vice Chairman, Pam Humphrey, Clerk to the Board, Kevin Sullivan, Member, John Breyer, Alternate Member, Don Johnson, our Town Planner, and Mark Marziotti, Chairman. So we'll get started right away with item A, approval of the meeting minutes of October 25th.
Well, the way it's passed out tonight, there's one additional sentence that Carol hadn't actually finished it where they sent it out. She just finished it with the last sentence on the second page. It's been added.
Okay. So do we have that here? Because a number of us have read the minutes, so if it's just a matter of reading that sentence, we can still vote on the minutes.
Last sentence on the first page, second page rather.
On the third page, right?
The very last sentence, Don?
Yes.
Oh, yes, the one that we got sent to us stopped at G and she had H. Planner's plate. Okay, so there was
okay.
nothing on votes or anything like that. Okay.
So I guess it stopped at G before, so.
Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, I'll make a motion that we approve the amended minutes submitted by the town planner for this meeting, submitted to us this meeting for October 25th, 2017.
Okay, we have a motion.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the amended minutes received by the planner tonight for October 25th meeting. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? And then I guess there's some minutes from our...
Yeah, that wasn't ready when I sent out the agenda initially, but
All right.
it's ready now if you'd like to.
So where is it under which tab?
Under item A,
Still item A.
Still at
first page.
The October 18th
Oh.
ones?
Did you get one?
These are for the 25th. but-
Okay, so I'll make a motion to accept the October 18th minutes. It was a special meeting of the planning board to approve an A&R plan for Willard Stevens. Present at that meeting was myself, Pam Humphrey, and Kevin Sullivan.
Okay. So we have a motion to approve the minutes of October 18th, special meeting of October 18th.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Okay, so we'll sign both of those. There you go. Well, we have three, so we'll just... Thank you. Set?
Yep.
And looks like you guys are set, right? Yes. So, item B is a pre-application for a mill conversion project. Wind Development's preliminary plans for the repurposing of Stevens Mill, and that's located at 8 Mill Street. So, Don, you want to give us just a brief overview of what this is, and then we'll have the guys.
Being submitted under the Mill Overlay District. It's a special permit process. It's well spelled out in the bylaw. It's based on a site plan and the development of the site according to the site plan. It's spelled right out in the register, what's beyond the plan, what we put all for. This phase is listed in the bylaws as a preliminary, a pre-application process. And it's just to get us acquainted with the project at this point.
Okay. All right.
I invited a lot of staff and board members, but they're not too many here, but.
Okay, maybe they'll show up. So what we probably should do is kind of skirt to the outside so we can actually see it. And then if we have to speak, just make sure you come up and speak into a mic. If you guys could just all sign in, introduce yourself, and then if you need to speak, please speak into the microphone that's provided there. It's the only way everyone else can hear you. Perfect. Thank you. I just need to focus that a little bit.
We tried. I think we're
Okay.
at the closest we can get.
Okay. All right.
Sometimes it's turning the lens from the outside.
Yeah, this is what does it.
There
Oh.
you go.
You have to
You're
touch.
Good job.
There you go.
All right, so, Dawn, members of the board, thank you for affording us the time tonight to come here before you and introduce kind of some of our initial thoughts on the adaptive reuse of Stevens Mill. My name is Matt Curtin. I'm one of the project directors at Wind Development. Been here for about a year and a half. Joined by, to my left here, George Peterson, who happens to be the current owner of the site, Adam Stein, our Senior Vice President of Development, and Connor Nagel from VHB. He's a project manager there. He's providing civil engineering services on the site. Has helped us a lot with refining our site plan, which we'll show you tonight. So I think, you know, before we get into our thoughts on the actual project, we just wanted to give you some broad strokes overview on the company itself and some of our representative projects that we've done in the recent past, and I think that'll make clear why we're interested in pursuing something at Stevens Mill. So, first of all, wind companies, under the umbrella of wind companies, there's actually 3 entities. Wind Residential, which is a nationwide leader in property management. They manage apartments across the entire, you know, income spectrum, if you will, from affordable units all the way up to luxury market rate. Wind Residential Military Housing Services is our property management arm that provides property management services to both on and off-base military housing for active duty service members and their families. And then Wind Development, of which Adam and I are a part, is a nationwide leader in adaptive reuse of historic properties, as well as new construction and acquisition rehabs. We operate primarily on the eastern seaboard, and the firm has been around since, as you can see there, 1971. So just some quick stats. The property management company is the 5th largest multifamily manager in the country, the largest affordable property manager in the country. We have about 100,000 units under management. We operate essentially nationwide with about 3,000 employees. Here's just kind of a quick snapshot of where we operate. Again, the development arm of the company is primarily on the eastern seaboard from DC up to Boston. We were founded in Boston, and I would say New England and New York is where the predominant portion of our business is, but the management side operates nationwide. Some recent awards. And then, as Adam alluded to, I want to just show a few representative projects. So again, the development side of the house, we are a residential developer. You know, that's our bread and butter, if you will. We produce affordable housing, market rate housing, mixed income developments. Again, new construction as well as adaptive reuse. But the company has also touched upon office, hotel, commercial. And so particularly relevant to Stevens Mill is our experience with adaptive reuse. We've been at this particular subset of development for about 25 years, creating about 4,000 units where there was previously none. Much of that work has been here in Massachusetts, a couple projects which we'll show in Worcester, as well as being pretty active in the Merrimack Valley. So here's a project that we're currently wrapping up in upstate New York, Sibley Square. It's about 1 million square feet. It was a former marquee department store in downtown Rochester, which had since become largely vacant. We're planning to do almost 200 units of housing in there, in addition to about 700,000 square feet of retail and commercial. Obviously a much bigger project than Stevens Mill, a multi-phase endeavor, but again, you know, many of the same things we'll have to address at Stevens Mill in terms of working through the SHPO, the National Park Service. Those challenges will present themselves here just like they did at Sibley. So something a little closer to home, Malden Mills in Lawrence. This was the site of the former Polar Tech factory, if anyone remembers that. They had a big fire, I think in the late 90s. The owner kind of tried to keep things afloat, just the economics weren't there. We were able to come in and in 2 phases provide almost 140 units of mixed income housing. And this property has actually won quite a few awards and was a catalyst for some of the ongoing redevelopment in downtown Lawrence. Boot Mills, I think a lot of people are probably familiar with this because of the National Park Service's presence there. This was a almost 1 million square foot complex that we essentially, excuse me, have redeveloped over about 10 years. And you can see, in addition to apartments and condos, there's offices. The National Park Service has a museum there. And then a little closer to home, I wanted to show Canal Lofts, and then I'll show you Vogue. Canal Lofts in Worcester, about 64 units of mixed income housing, 50% market rate, 50% affordable. This is a LEED certified property. And then Vogue, also in Worcester, a little bigger, 84 units. About the same funding sources, again, a mixed income development. And these are the sorts of properties that we're looking to bring. This is what we're looking to bring to Dudley. And lastly, Livingston School Apartments in Albany, New York. This was a school Adam was operating until 2004, 2007, and then vacant for about 5 or 6 years when we came in. This property has been adapted to be mixed income, elderly, about 100 units in partnership with the Albany Housing Authority. And some of the awards that these projects have won. So I wanted to give that overview first to just give you a little flavor for what we've done in the past in this area, and you know, I think that might help shape our vision for what we'd like to do at Stevens Mill. So I think before we get into the site plan, and I brought some schematic floor plans for you as well, just wanted to give you maybe the wave tops on what we're thinking right now. So we like to think that we are right sizing this development. I think probably the last time you guys saw a proposal for this, it was for about 164 units. That was our understanding that the previous developer was looking to do. I think probably the scale he was trying to bite off there might be why he's not working it right now. We think 92 units is a good mix. Similar to the projects we showed you before, we want to do mixed income housing. I think we're thinking about right now approximately 60% affordable, excuse me, 40% market rate, and I'd be happy to delve into a little bit later, you know, the financing sources that we contemplate when we talk about affordable and what that tenancy looks like. So our unit mix right now is 75% 1 beds, 25% 2 beds. I think, you know, that's important for a couple reasons. Most importantly, probably for for all of you is that that meets the guidelines specified in the Mill Conversion Overlay District. But I think also important to note is that that's really just a function of the mill itself. You know, in terms of converting it to housing, it doesn't lay out efficiently. So 1-bedrooms were really just a function of the dimensions of the property and what we have to work with. So I think also in the spirit of the overlay district, I know that the zoning calls for this to be a mixed-use district, and I think we meet that in a couple different ways. I think first of all, the adjacent Tri-Valley Elder Care Services, which is within the district, is a commercial enterprise. We also think that there's opportunities for synergies there with any senior residents that might be in this building and the services that Tri-Valley provides in this area. But also too, we really can't absorb all the square footage of this property in a initial phase of the development. So part of it we'd like to defer for future commercial use, and when that opportunity presents itself, we'd certainly entertain bringing a commercial tenant into the part of the structure that we actually have. The proposed parking that we have will meet the zoning specifications. We have a ratio of over 2 to 1. And then lastly, you know, we have about 6,000 square feet in what we call programmable space right now. You know, I think, you know, that we'll have a fitness room. We're envisioning like a yoga studio. It's like an Amazon package drop-off area. But some of that's in flux, and a lot of, you know, the programming, we'll refine that through, you know, engagement with the community, through market studies, and through consultation with our own, you know, property management arm, who kind of has a feel for what the tenancy would be looking for. So with that, I think, you know, here we have our initial site plan. Connor, I think I'll turn it over to you if you'd like to speak.
Matt, do you think it's worth it, just one sec, just to go back to that photograph and just show the building that's being retained, or is there a better slide that shows after what's being demolished and what's being retained?
No, I think this would be a good spot. I mean, it'll become evident on the schematics, but
You show where the, you know, one-story rubber roof is. And
sure. So as you know, this is a historic structure listed on the National Register. And so what we'd like to do is kind of bring this property back to its former glory. So the non-contributing structures, as they call them, the portions of the property that are not historic, we'd like to take down. So primarily that's where the flea market exists today. We would demolish this. This portion would be deferred for future use right now. The bulk of the residences would be located here and here. And then this area would be deferred for future commercial use. So we would envision our main entryway here into the property. This would be like the main courtyard with parking, including our handicap accessible parking. Of a secondary parking area located here. And then finally our tertiary parking. This view doesn't really delineate clearly the property line between Tri-Valley and ourselves, but I would say that this property, the parking that we would have would be from about here to here.
the next slide, it's almost a picture that photograph turned 1/4 to the left. So that's the, you know, the viewpoint there. In the middle, that big roundabout was where the flea market was.
Connor Nagel with VHB, Matt had said, civil engineer for the project. As Matt said, the existing building was here, the flea market building that would be taken down to create the drop-off and main parking area. This area is all building and pavement existing, as is the area back here, broken pavement Most of the existing up through here is gravel and weeds that would be cleaned up. This blue line is the property line. You can see the delineation between Tri-Valleys parking and the project site. The site is about 6 acres, just a little under. This plan here would represent a 5% increase in landscape or open space over the existing condition. Obviously that would be landscape area for the most part, with some thought putting into improving the aesthetics around the site. Creating new parking here, obviously we would need to go to the Conservation Commission, and this would be subject to stormwater improvement for the whole site that doesn't exist today. It currently just sheet flows to the adjacent street. The curb cuts, there's one down here today and one here, so we would tidy that up. We're proposing right now just to have one. Traffic from this type of development would be a reduction in what you would expect from a reuse of the light industrial complex that it is. Residential for 97 apartments really doesn't generate that much traffic. That's really all to say about the site plan. I'd be happy to answer any questions on that.
Yes, quick question here. The orange square in the back on the kind of the corner of the building and in the greenery area, what does that represent? Yeah.
So that happens to be, I don't know if that was like a former pump house or utility room, George, but it's a historic structure.
They did some combing of the flax back there. Dog pound for a while, now it's used up to electronics testing.
So essentially not a use, not of a sufficient size to be, you can't put a residential unit in there.
Right.
So, we're going to fix the roof. We're going to make it, sufficiently, watertight against the elements. We're going to clean up the exterior. It'll be deferred for a future use.
Right. And you think include in the commercial deferment or more like, I don't know,
I
just
think
inside the property?
Well, it's right beside the waterfall.
Right. Yeah, I've never seen the backside of
I
buildings.
thought it would be a very lovely spot for a restaurant, with a patio overlooking the falls.
Okay.
There was some interest in a local, given the small Italian restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
But I think.
So that's the former site of the canine.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
Right.
So I wanted to bring along some of the schematics, just to try and illustrate.
Can I just ask one question before we move on?
Sure.
Just because, about the reduction in traffic, what are you basing that on?
We're basing that on a reuse of the mill as a light industrial complex.
So are you saying a reduction of what the traffic is now,
What
or?
it could be by right as a reuse of the mill. No, not what it is now, it's not
What it-
fully occupied, but if it were to be reoccupied as of right, as the mill, a light industrial complex,
Mhm.
residential would be less traffic than that.
Okay.
So I just wanted to give you a feel. This is obviously a schematic, not full-blown plans, but just sort of, as I alluded to earlier, I wanted you to be able to see where the preponderance of the residences would be, and then the areas that you see shaded are deferred for future use. And again, those, deferring that is for a couple of reasons. So, first of all, some of these areas just don't lay out well for housing. It's just not efficient. And I think, secondly, it's a function of market demand, and you have to, we have to accurately try and predict how many units we think we can fill. And, if you're in Worcester, might be north of 100. In Dudley, based upon market demand, the size of the town, the size of Webster next door, we feel like 92 units is an appropriate number for right now, deferring some of that square footage, of course, for future commercial use. So, again, we have about 6,000 square feet.
Through the chair, just a quick question, and just for my own clarification. These are not condos, these are rental units,
That's correct.
and you will be the landlord.
That's correct, with an on-site property management. Sorry, turn and face you, I was trying to talk to the mic. With an on-site property management presence. So 92 units, 75% of which are one beds, 25% two beds. And the floor plans essentially repeat themselves, floors 2 through 5.
I do have a quick question too.
Sure.
It's just a little foggy to see on those layouts. So the deferred for future use, I remember you said before, like, you know, like on-site gyms or what have you. Is that included in the deferred for future use? Or is
No,
that in
we've accounted for that space.
Okay.
So again, we're looking at this as about a 60% affordable, 40% market rate development. And affordable developments have their own particular financing mechanisms, which are, you know, primarily the low-income housing tax credit, but there's also a number of state and municipal subordinate sources that are included. So I just wanted to give you a flavor of what are the potential programs that we've used before that we may look to use here? What do those incomes look like in Dudley? You know, and what are the potential tenancies associated with those sorts of incomes? And also because I think, you know, at least as far as what we'd like to present to the board, there's a couple, you know, timelines that we are looking at associated with the financing applications for this project that we'd like to talk with you about. So first of all, just the overall timeline. So we envision the affordable, for the affordable units, applying to the state, to DHCD, for 9% low-income housing tax credits, which are a competitive funding source, funded once annually. Currently, the pre-application period is open, and what that means is DHCD essentially asks for a broad strokes 10,000-foot view of your project, and they just make sure that they think it's feasible and that you have your ducks in a row and you have the capacity to follow through. If you meet that benchmark, in February they open the no kidding full application to those companies that they've screened, or those projects, excuse me, that they've screened. So we are looking to do a full-blown application in February. If next year is like this year, they'll announce the competitive funding awardees in late summer next year. And assuming receipt of award, then we can start moving towards engaging with tax credit investors, construction and permanent lenders, working towards a construction loan closing in December of 2018. So assuming we were able to kick things off the next month with construction, we'd be looking at probably construction completion around September of 2020, and then probably take about 6 months to get to what we call stabilization, or 90 to 95% occupancy. So I think the last thing I wanted to present to the board was, as I was saying, with these financing applications, there's some deliverables that we owe the state, and some of them are deliverables that the anticipation is you have already engaged with the municipality and you work with the municipality to submit these to the state. So we've gone out, we've done a preliminary analysis of where the utilities are located. Actually had the opportunity to meet with the Water and Sewer Commissioner a few months ago. He walked the site with me. So we don't think that we need easements or cross easements from any abutters, but we will have to provide documentation of the actual capacity to serve the site. So if we can engage with the Dudley Water and Sewer Department it's something that we'd like to have to give to the state by November 30th when the pre-application period closes. I also think critically, and this is something that I think I've alluded to before, Don, is you have to address where you are in the zoning approval process with DHCD. Of course, this is a overlay district with a special permit. It's not an as-of-right development. So I think it would be incredibly helpful in terms of demonstrating the project feasibility and a degree of municipal support that we'd be able to go to DHCD with a letter that says, wind development appeared before the board on this date to present their project, based upon our preliminary review, we believe that the project falls within the guidelines of the mill conversion overlay district. Doesn't have to be definitive yet. I think we just want to evidence to the state that we have appeared, presented the project, and have made an effort to meet the overlay district specifications.
Yeah, and I would just add to that zoning is a threshold for approval. So we can't even submit our application, I would
That's
say,
right.
if we don't have evidence that the underlying zoning, not a site plan approval, but the underlying zoning is compatible with what we're proposing. So there are certain threshold things that we've got to make sure we check the box on the application, or we can't even submit it. So
2 or 3 line letter is what you're looking for, I take it.
that's all it is. Meets the criteria of
Absolutely.
the overlay, and you can reference a site plan or whatever it is. You can certainly say that the proponent has to come back for a site plan approval and is subject to whatever. I think we're really concerned about the underlying zoning being compatible for the proposed use.
And of course, I know that the slideshow format tonight is not ideal. Happy to send you site plan and some of the schematics and drawings that we have.
Right.
Hard copy format if it's easier for you to review and reference to that end. So those are kind of the near term deliverables. Looking a little farther down the road for when the actual application opens up. We'd really like to engage with the Conservation Commission as soon as possible. I think Connor alluded to that, and receive some sort of written documentation, blessing the project, if you will.
I think we'd have to file for a permit, right,
Right.
Connor? We'd have to go through the process of developing some stormwater, management plan, make an application. I assume if the application is February 15th and we started this in the next, 30 days, that we could get to an approval. I'm not saying you would approve it, but from a meeting timeline, we could get there if everything was acceptable. So I think we'd look for some type of outline from the Conservation Commission, what the process is and what the timeline is. So we haven't met with them yet, but I think that's something we'd want to do in short order here.
And I think lastly, and this is something I've engaged previously with Dawn as well as the town administrator, is a condition of funding these competitive applications. DHCD requires some form of municipal contribution. So essentially they want to see skin in the game from municipalities. There's no minimum dollar amount they're looking for. There's no formula associated with the size of the town or the size of the project. They recognize that different municipalities have different capacities to contribute, and the contribution can take many different forms. So I tried to put some up there just as discussion points. This is something that we certainly have experience working through municipalities with, and we can offer potential solutions to get through this, over this particular hurdle. But some of the forms we've seen it take before are infrastructure improvements, and these need to be infrastructure improvements obviously that are adjacent to the site, the benefits of which can be at least somewhat attributed to the site, not something across town.
We've just done a new water main.
Mill
Right.
Street is just been done, that's right.
What's that, water main?
Yeah.
Yep. So water main, sidewalks, accessibility improvements, things like that the town would put in that would benefit the property is a good example.
Right. Fee relief from things like permits or utility connections, I think grant funding is something that we've talked about, and this grant funding can be future commitments of CDBG or home funds, and then, you know, of course, some sort of tax relief. It sounds, you know, I think that there's some experience for economic development purposes, you know, here in the town. I think, you know, I sent the town administrator some thoughts on where there might be room for, or applicable, you know, residential TIF districts. But these are the, you know, some of the initial thoughts we had and some of the items we have experience with, and we really just wanted to put that out on the table as a discussion point, because as a, like I said, as a condition of competitive funding, we have to meet this benchmark in one form or another. But we're happy to try and like step through the process with you and find a solution that works for the town.
Couple things. It's in, we talked about this earlier today, I believe. It's in the Aquifer Protection District. So you'll need to work through that with the Water and Sewer Department, the Water and Sewer Commission.
Okay.
And is any of it on the floodplain? Any of it on the floodplain?
It's not in the
Not at all? Okay.
And then one thing, Matt, I realize is not on here, for the actual application on February 15th would be a support letter from the Board of Selectmen. So we would need some sort of letter evidencing the fact that we've appeared in front of the board and they've understand the project and they support it. Because DHCD wants to make sure that these projects are supported by the municipality that they're in. And when I say support, not necessarily financial, but the fact that they want the project in their town. And we can give you guys a draft of that, or we'll meet with the Board of Selectmen separately, however you want us to do that.
I believe they're meeting next Monday, and probably 2 Mondays after that.
Okay. So I think what we could do, if it's helpful, we can get you a draft letter that we've used in the past as an example. Take a look
Okay.
at it. I don't know if you want us to send it to you, Don, or someone else.
Send that to the Selectmen's office, either
Okay.
that Selectman or the Town Administrator.
Okay.
Okay.
You certainly CC me.
Absolutely. So I think those, you know, unless I dropped or forgot something, Connor, George, Adam, I think those are the items that we want to present to the board. Happy to answer any questions, and again, we appreciate your time.
I guess the one thing I would add before you, if you guys have questions, is the reason why we're presenting it this way and we're referencing DHCD and the things that the project requires is this is a pretty competitive process for funds. So these are basically state subsidies that are available specifically for affordable housing. There are housing tax credits and there are historic tax credits. Those are the main two components. The historic tax credits are issued through MHC, through the state, and through the Park Service, which is the federal form. And we're working to...
10 years.
Right. And we've been working through George. George has been very helpful acquiring those credits along the way. So we've accounted for a lot of the historic credits already associated for the project. What we don't have are the housing tax credits, and that's what's issued through DHCD. So if you think about it, you probably have, and this is no joke, 100 applications go into DHCD on an annual basis through a pre-application process. They whittle those down to about 50 applications that'll go in February, and then they'll fund about 20 of those applications. So it's a super competitive process. So everything we're outlining here tonight is in an effort to make it competitive and an effort to get it funded. If the town can't do this, and I'm not saying this in a negative way, then we can't pursue the deal because we're going to compete against Worcester and Springfield and, you know, Fall River and Lowell and Lawrence and all these similar type projects. So what we really want to do is be transparent in what we're trying to do and show that these things are needed to be competitive. And I think that this is something that we believe in and certainly we've had success in before and want to make sure that the town is on board as well and to try to explain, and I hate to use the game, but to try to explain the game and to try to explain the process so you guys understand why we're asking you for these things. It's not because we need your sidewalk improvements, although that would be great for the property, but it's also part of the process and it's part of the application process. And unfortunately, we're competing against municipalities that are able to do that pretty readily. And like Matt said, they're not going to compare us to a city like Cambridge that has a big pot of money for these things.
but they are looking for these municipalities to do some sort of partnership. So I hope you guys are understanding why we're asking for these things.
So, yeah, so I've got a question. So what's, other than aesthetics, what's the benefit to the town?
Well, you want to start, Matt, or you? Yeah.
Sure. Well, I think that certainly there's going to be an increased tax base. I know that we mentioned on there some sort of tax arrangement as one of the municipal contributions, but that doesn't mean that the town is getting nothing or less than it's getting now, and we would certainly envision, if we went that route, still stepping up the contribution every year. I think a property of this size has the ability to catalyze future development. There's already a small commercial component on that site. There are buildings there that are deferred for future use that could accommodate future commercial growth. As you alluded to, it is obviously a prominently located building, and so yes, there will be aesthetic improvements. Those are the ones that foremost.
Yeah, I think it's also, if it's a 40, plus minus $1 million investment in the town, and it's taking a building, no offense, George, that is not used to its full capacity, is somewhat blighted, is somewhat deteriorated, is somewhat unsafe, and it changes all that, and it makes it safe, and it makes it occupied, and it makes it viable for future development. So I think there's a lot of reasons why this is a good thing for the town, we believe, so.
I've been at this for 12 years, and I really believe it's the highest and best use. We've gone through other scenarios, but
Thank you.
I bought this thing 12 years ago. To me, it was the most beautiful building I'd ever seen. I'm an engineer, fooled with this all my life. I was hooked. And I think to preserve it, not aside from pure ethics, this is the only way to proceed, I feel. You guys agree?
Your time is perfect. First, I want to say thanks for considering Dudley.
Yeah.
I'm chairman of the Economic Development Committee here in town. And the mill is an important piece of the town, history-wise, visually, a whole bunch of different things. Your timing is actually pretty good. We just concluded a town-wide survey, and we actually had a question on the mill that we asked everybody, and I'll share the results. And we can, of this one
Want to read
question.
it? We really want to read it?
All right.
Affordable housing.
So when we asked the town, what would you like to see there? Overwhelmingly, they were looking for it to be, let's see, should be converted to commercial, mixed use, or low impact industrial uses. That was 33% of the vote. Low income housing by a private developer with tax breaks from the town received 2 votes, 1.48%. It was, what you are requesting is the least desired by the town. There was, a lot of people had written down comments. The one thing that the town is lacking is 55 and older housing for our residents. There's a lot of Dudley residents that as they get older, start having trouble maintaining their property, would like to stay in Dudley, and there's no place for them to go. Now,
We did an assisted living scenario, but the demographics just didn't work. There's
No.
competition, the rates we'd have to charge just would not fly.
so one of the challenges that the town has is, how do we make something happen with the mill, but it's also in the town's interest. That's not a bad deal for the town. So you look at, 96 or 92 units. Let's take worst case scenario and say that there is a child that goes in each of these 92 units. You've now increased my cost for the town $1 million a year, just on the education side. Is the town of Dudley going to earn more than $1 million a year in taxes from this development?
one bedroom, I think, is probably the least attractive to a family. And one of the
Understand,
reasons we
you would
picked one
think so
bedroom.
logically, but there's a number of, one-bedroom apartments that have 4 or 5 family members throughout the area there. The other challenge Dudley has, not into this project, but just as a whole, right? Because, we're trying to build something with the resources that we have, is we have 3 family homes in town that pay $1,200 a year in taxes for all three units. That's less than what the average home does. And yet, the impact on the schools and the resources is 3 times the impact. And so what we would really like to be able to do here is figure out, how can we do a win-win? I mean,
Y-N-N, win-win.
right? I mean, and often win-wins mean a little bit of hurt on both sides in order to get something done. But, it's important that the town, if we are going to invest, see a good return on that investment. The idea of, geez, an increased tax base, if you were to make them condos and they became 92, independent property units out there and paying $1,500, $2,000 a year in taxes, where do I sign for the approval, right? You've just increased our tax rate $180,000 to $200,000 a year, if that's the case. But that's not what you're proposing here.
We're proposing what we think works from an economic standpoint. And I don't disagree with you that condos or commercial might be better. We're not proposing that. I don't think there's a market for that, unfortunately. I think if George could have found, I want to speak for George, a commercial user to create jobs, which is probably what the priority is, long-term jobs, I think George would have done that.
Right.
So I think our take is housing is the most efficient use of the building. Rental housing is the most efficient use for the type of program that we're looking at, and we need these subsidies in order to do this type of housing. The building itself has negative economic value. The cost to rehab these units and to rehab this building, the numbers are very expensive. So if you were to say, let's do it as a market rate deal, no subsidy, no affordable housing, or condos, build and sell, the numbers don't work. This is, pick the building up and put it in Cambridge, pick the building up, put it in Somerville, pick the building up and put it maybe downtown Worcester, it might work. But the economics just don't work in Dudley. And that's just our assessment, and that's why we're proposing this. I don't disagree with your survey. If I took this survey and I said, what would you like in an ideal world, I get it. But I just don't think the numbers meet that criteria.
Now, just as a wild card, Massachusetts put a very aggressive proposal for the Amazon headquarters. All right? Worcester actually has a really good shot at pulling this off,
Really?
especially with the area that they've
No
proposed there off of Route 20. It's prime and it's easy access. Hypothetically, if Massachusetts was successful and Worcester was successful, could that change the dynamics of a project like this?
I think it would certainly improve the market situation. You'd probably add a few more units. I don't know, these guys are the experts.
Could I ask with your current proposal that you have on the table now, how much square footage of the facility is being used for residential, and how much are you setting aside for future commercial or other uses?
So I believe the building we think, excuse me, I believe the building we think that best supports commercial is about 30,000 square feet.
Right.
I'd have to revisit to get you the specific number. I think in total, the complex is about 190,000 square feet, but that includes that large flea market that's not a historic structure and that we plan to demo. So I think in total, we're probably looking at like 120,000 square feet.
Of residential.
Of residential.
30,000 commercial. Yeah.
Correct.
So with your history in developing similar properties for mixed-use residential and, commercial in the future there, what do you anticipate going in that deferred use? I know we're preliminary here, pre-application hearing, but if you could give us an idea of the kind of options we'd attract with the residential and the commercial.
Well, you know, I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, we thought that the adjacent Tri-Valley Elder Services presents some possible synergies with an older tenancy. You know, we do not plan to market this as a seniors development because the funding sources seem to favor not designating property senior developments, but 75% one bedrooms are what we call seniors by design, right? So we think that the extra space could accommodate any growth for Tri-Valley. You know, the times we've been out there, their parking lot is quite full. Beyond that, you know, we haven't identified a potential tenant. You know, as Adam alluded to, Dudley is not Worcester, you know, right? It's a reality. So we are open for any and all comers who want to talk about their commercial space needs, and we would explore that. But beyond looking immediately adjacent to the property, no, we haven't identified any commercial tenants.
But I feel like it lends itself more towards a office and industrial, or office and institutional type of commercial space versus a retail. You know, if you hear commercial, you hear retail, or you think retail. I don't necessarily envision this as retail. It's more of a commercial or institutional type use.
So in the main building, you have how many floors you're looking at for residences or apartments?
5.
5 floors. If that was reduced to 4 floors, what would you be talking for units, number of units?
Oh, I don't know. I have to look at the plans to figure out how many units we have on a per floor basis, but 20 units maybe, something like that.
All right, so if this was a
A
project.
92 unit deal to a 70 unit deal, something
Okay,
like that.
so yeah, if this was a project at 70 to 75 units, does the number still work? If let's say the first floor was reserved for commercial or retail space or office space or.
I would be inclined to say, you know, Adam, I don't want to take the floor here, but I don't believe so. You know, Adam talked about the negative economic value of this building as it stands right now and the cost that it's going to take to rehab it in accordance with National Park Service standards. So when you look at the cost on a per unit basis at, let's say, 75 units versus 92, at 75 units, that per unit cost becomes unpalatable to the state funding agencies that we have to go to ask for subsidy.
The other thing too is we don't have a commercial user. So when we put forth an application, we can't underwrite something that's not there, right? So we can't say we have, you know, 20,000 or 10,000 square feet of commercial space, and we have no user for that. We can't underwrite that. We can't leverage any supportable debt off that fictitious commercial space. What we do have is residential housing, and what we do have is the ability to prove out what those rents will be and what that underwriting will prove out for a permanent loan. We can underwrite that, but we can't do that with the commercial. I don't feel confident that we could put forth an application in the next 3 or 4 months with a long-term lease with a commercial user at this site that we can say this really works. So I think the thinking is, at least our thinking is, we start with the residential, we identify some space for some non-residential space, and if the residential piece is successful, which we think it will be, that gives that commercial space that much more opportunity to be successful.
And is the reason you're not developing the commercial side is that it's not financially feasible to add additional residences in that? Or are you purposely making it mixed use because you feel as though your application benefits would be better?
Maybe we'll go reverse. I think we also cap out at a certain amount of units. So even if that building, I think it's building 8, is it building 8 or 7 that we're setting aside?
7.
7, sorry. So even if building 7, which is the 30,000 square foot building, were set aside for commercial space, yielded, I don't know, 15 units that were efficient, the amount of resources the state allocates for on a per project basis, we cap out at about 90 units max. So we wouldn't even be able to do residential units in that space even if we wanted to.
So then you say, okay, what's the next best thing? What's the next best future use? And then that's why we identified that as a future use for commercial.
John, I have a question for you. Oh, who were the recipients of this survey and who?
We had it online for a month, then we also left it at the Council on Aging, the library, and at the Selectman's office for those that didn't have computers.
Okay. Yeah, so, another part of Dudley is that we just had a town meeting, our fall town meeting, and we had 52 people there. So, anything that, would be needed to come to a vote for, for approval purposes, this is what you're up against, to a certain extent. And so, there's just that interesting fact, I guess, just so that you guys are aware.
So a site plan, permit application, just walk us through it if you don't mind. We go to the planning board and then it has to go to a town meeting?
No, like if he's talking, I think about like if you were looking for a tax tip or, the
Municipal
town to vote
Right.
for something to add, to make your application
Yeah.
look better to the.
But it's who would show up for a public hearing, and this is somewhat typical, but,
Right.
as public hearings and town meetings become more controversial relative to whatever the topic is or the warrant article, the attendance obviously increases. But it's a very, very protective group of residents, and I guess that's why in fairness to you guys, I just want you to know that going into it. I kind of asked the question that I asked about what the benefits to the town would be, not knowing that this was in existence, kind of tongue-in-cheek, just to see, what your response was. I was more curious than anything, not personally thinking that it would be detrimental to the town of Dudley.
Help me bridge, so let's just say, out of those 92 units, not a single one has a single student, all right? But so 75% of those are one bedroom, then actually 25% are two bedrooms. So that's roughly what, 24 two bedrooms, right? Let's just say they had one student. The town, if that student attends Dudley Charlton schools, we have to pay and this is only $20,000 a student, which is actually low. We'd have to pay $480,000 in additional expenses for that every year. So help me make this make sense.
Well, you can't exclude young families.
That's right.
No, I know you can't exclude one thing. I know you,
Yeah. Becomes a fair housing issue, I think.
but you're saying that 55 and older can't be supported by this. The demographics aren't there.
I just think the market is not.
The senior living thing, senior living tends to be more expensive and more billed, and the rents obviously are higher.
Yeah.
But if you're elderly, then I don't know.
We've done.
Time up.
We've done elderly-oriented developments before where we have an age restriction at 55 or 62, which are the two fair housing age restrictions. I think our concern is the depth of the market here, right? So how big is the market? How many residents are in that 55 to 62 age range that will qualify to live in this housing? And our concern was it's not that deep, and we'd rather not restrict ourselves to a certain age group. So we'd rather open it up to a non-elderly tenure, but make the units smaller by design, because that's what the building dictates. And we understand the concern about large families related to traffic and impact like that. And that was the thought, to do a lot of 1s and 2 bedrooms. So I can't answer your question about school children, but I.
Is that expensive?
What's that?
Is that typical?
20,000 is actually cheap, yes. Yeah, well, you look, our budget's $50 million a year for our school district today, between Dudley and Charlton.
Divided by how many kids?
What is it, like,
I'm not even sure.
it's like 2,500 to 3,000 kids, I think, maybe?
I'm up in the.
No, and actually, the Dudley per pupil spending is one of the lowest in the state.
Really?
Yes. They do an amazing job with it, what they have, you know, but it is.
You could have sent them to Harvard.
I know, right?
So question, guys, you spoke with our town administrator, Greg Balukonis. I'm not sure how detailed or what, but maybe you can give us a little bit of about what your conversation was and any feedback that he may have given you relative to your project.
Absolutely. So I had an opportunity to meet with Greg and Dawn maybe in July in person here when our plans were even less refined than they are right now. They really haven't changed materially, but just to give them broad strokes overview on what we're thinking and introduce myself and the company. I think the feedback I've gotten from Dawn and Greg thus far has been very encouraging. Adam and I talked to Greg again Monday or Tuesday, Adam, this week. I think it was Monday. And again, you know, he said he couldn't be here tonight, but he assured us that we have his support for this project.
Okay.
I think he understands that we have the capacity to deliver on this project. We have the demonstrated track record to deliver on the project. And he said that, you know, the town would, you know, work with us as a partner if we wanted to pursue this. And it needs to be a partnership because we need the town to exhibit a level of interest and enthusiasm to the state in order to make this project a priority for them.
And even if we support it, there's no guarantees they're going to support it, right? That you're going to get the
state, you
grant.
mean? Yeah, but we certainly won't get there if the town.
No, I understand.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not to interrupt you, but his understanding today is that it's, let's just round it to 100, and it's 75 one-bedroom and 25 two-bedroom?
I don't know if he recalls the 1 and 2 bedroom split
Okay.
off the top of his head, but when I met this summer, I would say I think at that point we were trying to look at like 94 units.
Okay.
And the unit mix was similar. I don't think
Okay.
we've ever had 3 beds in there, and the preponderance have always been 1s.
Okay.
I would also add that when we spoke with Greg, I wanted to make it clear to him this municipal contribution issue because we didn't want it to feel like it's a surprise.
Right.
As Adam said, we're not asking for it because we need it. We're asking for it because the state wants to see something. And he understands that and said that we would work through this together. I would just ask that people not get too wrapped around the TIF notion. That was just one of like 4 possible avenues that we can navigate this process. You know, we're just trying to, I guess, stimulate the conversation with some ideas. Yeah, I think.
So I'm sure that you come up with to this you have these issues with many towns as you go forward and kind of say, hey, we want to do this and we'd like some support from you. And again, it's not because you guys want it, but it certainly helps with the application or is actually somewhat required with the
That's right.
application. Has there ever been, a give back on, your end? And again, the business that I'm in, there's no gifting, there's no nothing, or you can't sell the merchant, so to speak. So it really kind of goes against my grain to even talk about it. But, when I first started with the planning board, one of the first subdivisions that we were approving was that if we did certain things, then the owner of the subdivision was going to buy a pumper truck for the fire department, and I just about fell off my chair. So I guess the roundabout way of asking this question is, so we improve the sidewalks, we do the things that you guys are, feel as though would give you the best chance of getting the grant money that you're looking for. Is there something that you guys typically or have done in the past in return to, better the community that your project is in?
Just trying to think. I think that it's,
municipalities that support these type of projects view this as a positive thing, right? And in order to take that old mill or that old school and make it viable again, they understand this is what they have to do. So if it's something like, if there are improvements necessary for traffic, for instance, so if we're impacting traffic and there's mitigation required, sure, the project can pay for that mitigation. If it's a stop sign or a signal or a sidewalk cut or travel lane or something like that. If it backs up to a conservation area and there needs to be a plan for, or there wants to be a plan for a public walkway or, passageway, that can become part of the project. So if there's mutual benefit to the public through a river walk or something like that,
Mhm.
or if there's impact to the municipality that needs to be mitigated because of our development, that's something we can also contribute to.
Okay.
One thing to keep in mind here is that our lock place is actually a private way.
That's the other thing.
It's humane access, but I'm sure it's been used for, many, many years. But it still is a private way.
We bought a little chunk out from Jim Levin that gave us water rights.
Can you give him
Yeah.
the mic? Thanks.
sorry.
Russ, really.
We bought from the previous owner, the last time we settled the finances, we picked up a piece of land that I think is in the middle of Adlock Place. But it gave us the water rights to the dam. Back then, we considered putting a little power plant in. We also have the land adjacent to the river. Did you know that? Are you going to use it? That might be a good contribution.
I mean, I think right now with what we'll call parcel B, the portion of the property that backs up to the French River, we anticipate making landscape improvements to the site. I mean, that's something that certainly warrants further consideration, right? And that's why we're here, to present our, initial thoughts on the plan and solicit your feedback.
We gave, I haven't mentioned to you, but we did give I forget the fellow's name, an easement for the Riverway Walk, which eventually is supposed to go up to Taunton somewhere. I mean, it's beautiful. And we did give an easement along that new piece that we acquired. Huge benefit to the town, the Riverwalk.
I just have a question. What happens if because you said it's very competitive, what happens if you don't get this grant? Is the project completely off, or do you try to get another grant, or?
I think we get right back in the hopper and we reapply the second time around.
You just put it off a year?
I'm sorry?
You just put it off a year then, and
Well, not
it
put,
come-
we wouldn't put it off, right? The state agency, if they decline to fund it that year.
Mhm.
So let's say we get to August next year and they don't fund the deal. Then in November, this time next year, it'll probably be yours truly. I'll be resubmitting the pre-application. And there is a priority that DHCD assigns to projects that have already been in the queue.
Mhm.
So you don't necessarily get leapfrogged by the project in Webster that gets filed for the first time next year. We would have some measure of priority or standing in front of them in the queue.
What's the bad in that?
That's assuming our seller is along for the ride.
That's right.
Mhm. So,
George.
yeah. So, so you guys have indicated that, you don't really have anything particular in mind as far as what the municipal contribution would be, but I'm sure you probably have some idea of what would make your application attractive. And can you maybe cite a couple things that you feel as though the town could contribute that would help you and maybe give you an edge to make this this application more desirable?
I think it's the things that Matt described. I think it's either some CDBG funds or home funds. I don't know if you're looking for a dollar amount specifically, but we've seen them range from $150,000 to $500,000, right, as a range. And then there are also like-kind improvements, so things we described like sidewalks water lines, sewer line improvements, things like that. Something that we can quantify, but again, there is no magic number. And I think there probably needs to be further discussion with, the building department or the sewer department to figure out what type of improvements either have been made or maybe in the pipeline that we can identify and put into the package.
Because I know this isn't your first rodeo, so I figured you guys have the finances figured out. We've already talked about, different scenarios, and you know that those factors won't make this property work. So I'm thinking there's something in your mind, probably even right down to, the dollar amount, whether it be, some of this, some of this, some of this, but the net is, X. And if not, then I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just trying to see if we can, flesh out exactly what it is so that we can cut to the chase, so to speak, and make sure we all understand exactly what this is.
I don't think we know the number yet, guys. I think we
Okay.
have to have some conversation with
Okay.
the town. It would be rude for us to sit here and say this is what we need without having a conversation.
Oh, fair
with
enough.
your departments and figure
Yeah.
out what's palatable and what's feasible.
Okay.
So I just don't feel comfortable saying that right now.
Yeah, this doesn't happen for us a lot. I know it's, something that you guys do every day, so that's why I thought, maybe if we had some sort of benchmark, then it may, make things move along faster, and we can have conversations with our, town administrator and whatnot, but it sounds like that'll happen anyway, so.
Yeah.
Could I ask a couple of questions? Let's just give the scenario that I think the easiest or obviously the least expensive way for the town to give into this project, my opinion, would be the tax TIF that you talked about. In the past, when towns have offered tax TIFs for these types of projects, are they permanent, or are they just for some number of years and they, start out no taxes the first year, 50% the second year, 25% the third year, and they gradually go away, or are they a permanent tax TIF? How does that work?
They range, and they do step up, and they do run for a limited period of time.
Okay.
So we've seen some as short as 7 years and some as long as 30 years. I think it all depends on the municipality and the state, frankly. And then there are also certain programs, like Matt described a TIF. There are also other types of HDIP type of credits that we can apply for that come with certain types of tax abatements. That's not eligible here, but they all run different courses. I think we need to figure out what the town could do by statute, and that's why Matt referenced a TIF, to come up with some type of graduated tax abatement. We're not looking for the town to create something necessarily that you've never done before or set a precedent where you're going to have a lot more of this and negatively impact the town. So we want to use tools that maybe you've done before, you've seen before, we can help bring to the table, that set the taxes based on today, whatever the tax is today, and graduates up to what the taxes will be on an as-improved basis. So there's no net reduction in tax, there's only gain, and it's a step up over a period of time.
And to your point about, what has the least financial impact to the town, I think pursuing the grant money, the CDBG funds, the home funds, and these are applications that Dawn has familiarity with. I think that's probably the bulk of our municipal contribution comes in that form, right, Adam?
99%, that's
Yeah.
right.
And that is at no cost to the town other than the time that it takes to apply.
Okay.
And, we'd be happy to sit down offline at some point and discuss that process. And also forward commitments of those funds, future commitments, if you will, of those funds is well received by the state funding agencies as well.
Okay.
Are there any other programs out there, funding programs that are specific to rental? There used to be a couple programs, the old Sharp, Teller. I don't know if they're still, those are the acronyms, I don't really remember what they were.
I think it's primarily the home funds and the CDBG funds. And I don't
So is
know if
that-
you have a consortium here for home funds or if it's specific to Dudley. I don't know if there's any sharing with Webster or other municipalities. I don't know.
No. Let's look into it.
Would it be possible, I think, I would like to see this if it's possible. I don't know if it's possible, but I think a lot of residents might like to see it also, would it be possible to put a tax number on what the project would be if it was fully rented out, 10 years down the road from now, fully rented out, at a given tax rate, this is what the project would bring in for taxes or add to the tax base versus what it's paying right now as a vacant
Sure.
building.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that.
I mean, I think people need to see that. You know, they're signing up for, the town basically is signing up for this. So, you know, in the end, if it's a negative, we should know it up front. If it's a positive, great. If it's a negative, then how big of a negative is it?
Understood. Yeah, no, we'd be happy to do that for you.
If it's a wash, you know, maybe that's okay too. But, you know, I think we need to see the dollars and cents, you know.
So George, is one of the signs of how important your mill is to the town. The town just invested $1 million to upgrade that sewer.
Oh, yeah, we appreciate it.
Yeah, they put 12-inch pipes in there, and when we were talking to them about, you know, as far as economic development, what is the area that they would focus in on the most, they said the mill because it's shovel-ready. The infrastructure's there. They said your biggest challenge is going to be mass DEP.
I think we have an extra stub off Mill Street, and we have great water pressure, because that pipe froze last year.
Yeah.
It had to go to the top of the roof. I never saw that much water pressure. And I think that main, you know, brought water down to that corner of the building.
Yeah. So you said that there was going to be a $40 million investment in Dudley. I think that was your opening slide. So, you know, what's that about again, just off the top of that, about $450 per unit is your investment? $450,000 per unit?
I think my budget right now is at 400, I think about 20
All
to
right.
425 a unit.
And how much of that, if you get the matching funds from the government, how much of that is going to be actually absorbed of that $40 million investment? Are they going to be contributing 10 million? Is it 40 million over the life of the project? Is it 40 million just to open the doors?
That's a $40 million development budget,
Okay.
and the development period would be presumably January of 2019 through the fall of 2021. I have to go back to my timeline slide here, but about a year and a half for development.
Don, do you know if there's a waiting list? I heard that there's a waiting list for like Joshua Place. And, I mean, do you know the whole process on who manages those requests for senior housing, where maybe we could get them some information?
Is it the Housing Authority?
Probably, right?
Might be, yeah.
You know, because every year we have to turn away people from going into our senior housing. And so, you know, believe me, we're trying to figure out a way to get this to work. Really are. So, you know, I wonder how many people a year we say, sorry, we're full, we can't help you. Is that 10? Is it 15? Is it 2? Right? And if there's a way for them to reserve that segment of maybe historical average, say we have 12 or 15 residents a year that want to go in, you know, and you kind of almost an informal extension of our existing senior housing.
Without getting into the logistics of how that would work, I can tell you that the property management arm of the company, Wynn Residential, has a lot of experience liaising with municipal housing authorities in terms of receiving wait list qualified applicants and moving them into units in which they are income qualified. So that wouldn't be a unusual arrangement for us to work out with the Dudley Housing Authority.
We'll reach out to the Housing Authority then. Yes, we'll do that.
And I'm wondering if, like Christopher Heights, my understanding is that they're pretty full there too, right? So,
Yeah.
you know, if we could form a series of partnerships focused in our senior community, right? And we get Christopher Heights, we get a couple of the other, the one in Oxford that's always full as well, that, you know, Joshua Place, maybe we can help. If there was a way for us to fill those 92 units with 55 and over, or to help you do that, would you have a problem making it a 55 and over project? if we could help you actually fill every year.
I mean, I think that's a conversation we would be open to having with you. But again, the issue with making it a age-restricted development is twofold.
I like to call it age-targeted, not
Sure,
restricted.
age-targeted. Got it. So the issue is twofold, right? It's what you're proposing may solve the notion that there's not sufficient market demand for it. The other problem is the state funding sources, which we envision using, frown upon funding elderly targeted developments right now.
P&L.
Yeah.
So again, the unit mix is elderly by design, but not in name.
It's elderly by design as long as the cost is commensurate with, I mean, I don't know what elderly housing is, and I don't know what your one bedroom's gonna go for, but, I mean, I understand the correlation and I understand what you're saying, but, and I don't know, maybe elderly housing is more expensive than what your one bedroom will be. No, but,
If you did assisted living, I mean, heck, that's $5,000-6,000 a month. That fund, have you talked to some of the assisted living companies out there? Yeah. I think we need to have a coffee, George, actually. So we're not
We
reading.
did a couple market studies. We've done, I just did an assisted living thing in Bourne, and that was a squeaker, but the same marketing group that said that was marginal, said this was, don't even try it.
Yeah,
It just did not work.
doesn't work here.
but that's moot anyway, because that's not what WIN does, right?
Right.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. We're not licensed healthcare providers. We don't do assisted care
Right.
housing, so I think you'd
Right.
have to talk to a different organization for
Yeah.
that.
Okay. Anyone else have questions?
I just have one question about the timing. You said at one point it was November 30th you had to get your application, your pre-application for the grant?
Pre-application.
So
That's
how
right.
much do you have to have from us by then? Because that's pretty close. That's only 3 weeks away.
I think
That's
it's
right.
really utilities and zoning.
Right.
Utilities?
Confirmation of utilities, which the town would only be responsible to respond to water and sewer, because it's
Mhm.
private gas and electric.
Mhm.
And a confirmation that the underlying zoning, the mill overlay, is compatible.
Okay.
So those are the two things for the pre-application.
Right.
So as far as zoning goes, right, I mean, section 3.10.05 says, within a mill overlay district, residential use or assisted living facility shall be permitted in conjunction with one or more of the following specified non-residential uses. There's got to be commercial or institutional, recreation, and appropriate accessory uses. So I think the board's going to have to say, okay, they're putting the commercial on deferment, but the fact that it's being deferred, is that a deal breaker for the board? If not, then they technically are good with the zoning.
Sir, I would also add that the district encompasses Tri-Valley Elder Care Services, which is a commercial enterprise located within the district. And I think when the district was formed, that was entirely one property, right, George?
Yes.
You owned that where Tri-Valley occupies today?
I didn't, but the previous.
The previous owner did. So I think the spirit of the code would be met by pairing a residential use on that site with the existing Tri-Valley commercial use. Not to mention, as you alluded to, we intend to defer about 30,000 square feet for future commercial development.
But even without that, with the commercial space, it meets the,
Yeah.
well, we hope the session was productive. I mean, obviously the goal, the task for the planning board is to protect the town, to make sure that we have our town residents' best interests at heart. We're the spokespeople for them. And, and also to not set you guys up for failure either, and so we want to make sure that I'd rather you hear it here than, you know, on the floor of the town hall, the town meeting, or, you know, somewhere else, another department. So we try to be as open and honest and, you know, as critical or non-critical as we can be so that you guys are prepared going in. I think you've heard us all say that, you know, it would be great to see that site be developed. It's such a beautiful building, and, you know, you guys certainly seem like a buttoned up organization. Some of the projects that you showed us were just outstanding. I've actually visited some of them myself. So, you know, certainly looking for a responsible developer. That's very, very important to us. So there's a lot of boxes that certainly have been checked off, but there's some others that, you know, obviously will warrant some additional conversation, and, you know, certainly welcome those, and it'll be good for us to hopefully have an opportunity to chat with our town administrator as well, and you know, see what his thoughts are, you know, from him. So, like I said, I hope it was productive, and Dawn is always available, so if you ever want to get to the board, you certainly can go through Dawn and ask any questions that you guys would like. Try to work with you the best we can, and make sure that we provide, you know, our honest and open opinions about, you know, exactly where we feel your challenges will be, or if there won't be any at all.
I appreciate that.
Great.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks for your time.
Welcome.
You actually got it offered. You actually got it offered. Who did? You did, or is it the CMRPC? Okay.
Freezing in here, is it me?
Damn place is just, the air conditioner's on 1 minute, it's on the next. Okay, so, thanks again, guys. We're gonna move on to item D, discussion of finishing construction of and acceptance of uncompleted and unaccepted subdivision streets. Don, any updates?
Not really any updates, no.
Okay. Item D, discussion on the status of economic development planning. John, you wanna?
Well, I think John will.
Well,
We were talking
yeah.
earlier today about the possibility of, we have a meeting posted for the 29th, which is not likely to be much new business on it, other than, even if we got a site plan now, we wouldn't have it that night particularly. We had, you know, we just, a Form A application, that's about it. So we thought it might be a good time to have the big joint meeting between the Economic Development Commission and the Planning Board to discuss the survey, to talk about what the inventory shows of the businesses in town, and maybe to look at the SWOT analysis as well. So.
Yeah, so we're not going to be able to hold our meeting next week, so we're going to cancel ours. So it's easier, I think, for us to try to jump into your meeting, and Central Mass Regional Planning will do the SWOT analysis of what they've been working on so far, and we'll go over the survey officially as well and release that.
Okay.
Give you an idea of what's going on there.
So that's gonna be,
Yeah, the 29th.
okay.
I got to make clear with my members as well, but I don't anticipate a problem.
All right. So, yeah, so we're not having a meeting on the 22nd either, right? Or are we?
That's right before Thanksgiving, isn't it?
Yeah. it's
The day before
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving, I
Yeah,
don't think you're gonna
I
wanna,
won't be here.
he's gonna wanna have talking.
Atta girl.
Everybody's cooking that night.
So,
They're not cooking there.
so
around
it
the
isn't
place to cook.
canceled yet, so we should probably talk about that. But before we do, so the 29th, you're talking about if we were having a meeting, you guys would attend it on the 29th?
Exactly. I'll post it as a meeting on our site as well, but it'll be considered a joint meeting. We won't cover minutes on our stuff.
Okay.
The sole purpose of our meeting will be for Central Mass Regional Planning to give their update.
Mhm.
We'll go do the survey as well, the finals on that. And then some of the things at the planning board, you know, when the survey actually gets released, we asked quite a few questions about in-home occupations. And there's broad support for expanding the use of what can be done as an in-home occupation. Also Airbnb, you know, to have regs like that. A lot of that is all going to fall on the planning board to figure it out and flush it out down the road.
Okay. All right, so who can make the 29th?
I can.
All right,
Yeah.
so it looks like we can all do that.
Okay.
So you've been advised on that we're going
Okay,
to move our 22nd to the 29th.
Well, we already did that.
All right.
Nobody was going to meet the night
We
before
did?
Thanksgiving anyway. Yeah.
All right.
We actually moved this one from the 15th to the 8th. Well,
All right.
a couple other things.
Anything else, John? On,
We got noticed that on December 7th, the Webster Dudley Business Alliance is meeting again, and they would like, at least I was invited, and
they invited
Senator
you?
John as well, yeah. So.
Okay, good. Yeah, wasn't there already something with them that you went to?
Last month.
Yeah. What was that?
It was someone from SCORE, and he was talking about starting up businesses in the format of an incubator, business incubator type
Oh, yeah.
operation.
Okay. All right.
And the last thing on economic is your own committee member, Kevin, has drafted 10 questions. We're going to actually do a survey now of the Nichols students
Right.
and
See
what
if
they
have any
think
input.
of Dudley and what they'd like to see in Dudley.
Oh, that's cool.
So I thought that was a pretty novel approach.
Explore our
So,
options.
yeah.
We
Very
can
good.
bring that up in November 29th too. I don't know what the timeline we're looking at for that.
Yeah, well, I'll
but-
ask PJ how much time she needs to get that
What do you-
survey through the school.
You gonna go to like a frat party or something?
I don't think we have frats. You know, something we can look at for zoning.
For zone.
Frat zone.
zoning,
Frat
yeah.
zone. All right. All right. Because I was gonna say I may be up for it. No. All right.
There's one other item I have under that category, I guess. Somewhat related. The CMRPC is having a planners forum tomorrow where they're talking about the regional trail map that they've been working on, and they're also talking about the statewide comprehensive outdoor recreation plan, known as the SCORP, and that's being rewritten, so I'd like to go to that one. It's from 4 to 6 p.m., so I'll be back before 7.
Good. All right. I think that'll be good. So, we didn't move to the planner's plate, however, I think we did. But I wanted to thank you, John, for coming here tonight. I know you're our alternate anyway, but, you know, and what you prepared, I think that was timely. I think that was important, and, yeah, I want to thank you for that, so.
Well, I did want to make sure that if it did go to the special permit, that I was informed all the way through, so.
Yeah,
That was
yeah. No, absolutely. So, appreciate that. So if there's no other discussion about planning, economic development planning, then we move to the planner's plate, but I don't know if you have anything else, Don?
Well, I can just tell you that I finished recoding, whatever you want to call it, the zoning bylaw, to include all the amendments from this spring town meeting.
Okay.
Anyway, I don't want to cut down too many trees, so if anybody would like a hard copy, just let me know, and I'll get one to you.
All right.
I can send it online, too.
You're also very kind to yourself in your self-evaluation, Don. No,
Oh,
just kidding.
thanks.
No, thanks for doing that. And who has completed an evaluation for Don? Or who hasn't?
I have not.
Doesn't matter. All right. So we all have to do that. I think we're already past the deadline, right? So how about middle of next week? would you guys be able to, because you can email this, right? Can you send us an electronic copy of this?
Say hard copy, electronic copy.
Yeah.
I believe an electronic exists. I've done it
One.
before that way.
A blank form, it's gonna be done electronically.
Get it before the 14th.
Okay.
So you can get it to me, and I can,
All right. And then, once they're complete, if you want to send them to Guy, he has agreed to tally them up. So basically what he does is he puts a value for each of the different attributes and duties, and then we come up with an overall score, and we go over, rather than Kevin said this, and you know, each of the members said certain things. We just give a score for each of the pieces.
Right.
And we can review those with Dawn, you know, online or offline or whatever the board prefers. So,
I'll send you the electronic blank form then.
yeah.
Yeah.
And thank you, Guy, for doing that.
Then we would email it to you, Guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And use Dawn's self-review as a guide. It's kind of helpful, you know, because there's a lot of things that obviously he's doing that he talks about that, you know, we as lay people don't remember all the time, but he lives this, so it's great. And you know, it's an opportunity for us to you know, give Dawn accolades, and also kind of a wish list to say, hey, I hope that we can work on this and work on that and do some other things.
Yep.
But yeah, all right. Sounds good. Any comments from the planning board? Anyone have anything?
Nope.
No? Okay. And there's no audience tonight, or at least now. So I'm entertaining a motion to adjourn.
so moved.
Here we got a motion
I'll second that
and
motion.
a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Thank you. Thanks, Fred.